topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast, broadcasting live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. This week and every week, we will reach for a higher purpose in money and life, as well as a focus on health and wellness. Now, let's join your host, Benita Bell-Andersen, as together we start with Asking Good Questions.
Hello and welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast. I'm your host, Benita Bell-Andersen, and I am so happy to have you back here again with us. This is part 2 today of our conversation with financial advisor and lifelong traveler, Jimmy Miller. In part 1, we had talked about tax traps and reporting surprises and account issues that sometimes makes going overseas to retire a little bit complicated. We are going to pick up where we left off. We're going to go deeper into the practical part of going overseas. Residency rules, visa choices, healthcare, couple dynamics, which I think might be interesting to discuss. Money moves that can help you stay flexible instead of getting boxed in. So if you've ever dreamed of living overseas, well, then this is it. This conversation should help direct you in the right way to go and what to think about and what are the good questions to ask. So with that, I'd like to invite Jimmy Miller to the podcast stage.
Hey, Benita. Happy to be here.
Yes. Thanks for joining me again. So we had such a good time the first time. It was like, there's so much more to talk about. So we had talked about tax traps. We're not going to do that today. Today, we are going to go really practical. I want to just really think about what are the practical things that people need to think about. So let's start with those really scintillating topics of residency and visa rules that really, I think, could drive the success of living abroad. So what would you say? What are some of the things I need to think about?
Yeah, absolutely. As retiring abroad is becoming more and more popular, Americans are looking to go overseas either to escape America currently because they're not happy with the political situation, or they're looking to stretch their dollars farther in countries where things are less expensive, like healthcare and lifestyle, or they're just looking for to get out of the rat race and have that laid back lifestyle. More and more Americans are seeking a retirement or working overseas now. And you ask a really great question, because one of the first considerations is, where is it possible to go? It's not possible to go to just any country for retirement overseas. There's different rules, visas, requirements that you have to meet for each individual country, or in some cases regions, like the EU. So that's the important place to start. So most people, when they think about retiring overseas, already have an idea of where they'd like to go. But there are people that really have no idea, and they're still in that exploring phase. So it's good to narrow it down first to a list of places that is possible depending on your circumstances. So I'd imagine most of the listeners here are American citizens, right? So that's the first thing to consider. If you're not an American citizen, you're listening to this, you might have different rules for visas and where you can go and can't go. But for most Americans, you are limited by where you can go. For example, you might have fallen in love with the UK, but there is no current visa for retirement in the United Kingdom. It's just not a possibility. So unless you can get there on another type of visa, like you have family there, or you qualify for citizenship there, or you plan to work there in retirement in some specialty field that can get you a visa, you just can't move to the UK, unfortunately, these days. But there are plenty of other places that you can move, and exploring some of those places and the different visa options is a good first place to start. The best good question you can ask first.
Well, I've done a lot of traveling in my life, but what's the difference between like having permission, going to live someplace, but actually becoming a tax resident? I think that's probably something that's fuzzy for people.
It is. It's definitely taxes for sure is a fuzzy subject, especially when Americans go overseas. As we touched on in the last time we talked, America is really the only country in the world that taxes its citizens worldwide. So an American going overseas, is still going to be responsible for taxes in America, even if they don't set foot in a year in America. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you're adventuring overseas for sure.
What do you think the most common? I mean, I think I think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there that people have about how long they can stay in a country. Is there like a rule of thumb or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. So visas come in different flavors. Generally, you can categorize them into working visas and non-working visas. They're also called non-lucrative visas. So for most retirees, they're going to be looking at a non-lucrative type visa. So they won't have the legal rights to work in the country that they're living in. Now, as a rule of thumb, it's different in different countries, but as a rule of thumb, once you've been in a country for more than 183 days or half the year, you become a tax resident in that country as well. So there are certainly people that don't want to trigger those tax residencies, and they're happy to move. So they spend, just under 6 months in Portugal, and then they move to Spain for the other 6 months, or they spend half the time in America and half their time overseas, so they don't trigger those tax residencies. But generally, 183 days is the thing to keep in mind. And for most countries, that's in a calendar year. There are a few countries that don't do their taxes on the calendar year. So you can often go to a country later in the year after the midway point and stay through the end and not trigger taxes for that calendar year on yourself. Now, most countries in the world, like America, they tax on worldwide income. So that's another important caveat to remember. America is the only country that taxes its citizens overseas. But like America, most countries, if you are a tax resident, is going to tax you on worldwide income. So if you've retired to Portugal or France or Japan, Australia, it doesn't really matter where, they're going to want to tax you on worldwide income. So your retirement accounts back in America, your pensions, your Social Security, things like that.
Well, is it possible then to trigger some kind of complexity that they weren't just because they spent time in the wrong place?
Absolutely.
How do you accidentally create a problem for yourself?
It's pretty easy to do, and a lot of people do it that retire overseas in the first couple of years. The most common one that I see is thinking that because they're not living in America, they don't need to file their taxes in America. That's a very common one. The second most common one is they think that the stuff they have in America is separate from their new country and don't realize that they're required to report and pay taxes on their American assets in their new country as well. So that's also a very common mistake.
What if I, want to move to Portugal and I just absolutely fall in love with it? If you get emotionally attached to your destination that you want to go, what are the residency related questions that they should be asking? What are the good questions they should be asking, Jimmy?
Yeah, good question. Do they have a visa program for non-lucrative retirees? That's the first great question. The second question is, if they have one, what are the requirements? Almost all visas come with requirements: a certain level of income, a certain level of money in the bank, a certain level of health insurance that comes with you. So there's a whole list of things that are going to be required. And for some people, they might really want to go to a country, but if that country's requirements are extremely high in income and bank accounts, they maybe just don't qualify to retire to that country.
Wow.
So that's the first place to start, and the first good questions to ask is to make sure you're going to qualify for the visa that you're after in the country that you want to retire in.
So unfortunately, when you're thinking about retiring, you're usually a little bit older too. So I want to turn to healthcare and banking and long-term flexibility in some ways that I don't think people are going to be thinking about. Are visa and residency choices going to affect healthcare, banking, things like that?
Yes, they are. Absolutely. So a couple things to unpack there. Some visas will come with public health care in certain countries,
Oh,
usually not in the first year, but after you've been there a year if you plan to stay. So, for example, Spain or Portugal, once you've been there for a year and you want to renew your visa and stay, then they will allow you to get on the public health care system. In the
oh,
meantime, in that first year, though, you do need to have a certain level of private health insurance to be in that country because you can't access their health care and they don't want you to be a burden on their system, of course, accessing their health care without insurance. So that's the first step for most countries. That's very typical. The other thing that's a big wake up call for Americans going overseas for retirement, and even those that have traveled a lot, because even if you've traveled a lot in your life overseas, it's unlikely that you've had a lot of experience with the medical system while you're traveling overseas. You're busy being on vacation and exploring countries. God forbid something happened to you while you're there and you experience the medical system. It's shocking to most Americans how inexpensive the medical system is in many places around the world and how first class the medical care is. Um, it's not nearly the shock that it is in America for healthcare costs overseas.
hmm. Well, do you have any real life examples of some of these decisions that might create a bigger problem later on?
Yeah. Um, I meet people all the time that are in search of policy that will help them qualify for a certain visa or how to structure their financial accounts in a way that's going to make the visa application pass the test for them. Working with an expat type advisor to structure your income the right way for certain visas is certainly helpful. I often recommend either Cigna Global or Safety Wings for people that are looking for the health insurance piece. Safety Wings has become quite popular. They're global. You can buy it on a monthly basis. You can choose whether you want American coverage attached to it or not American coverage. So everywhere else in the world but America. Of course, if you attach American coverage, it goes up. But for some people who are traveling and they want to come back and still have coverage in America, maybe they're not Medicare age yet, that's
Well,
a good
yeah,
option.
that's what I'm wondering. See, we just completed a senior mission to Hawaii, but one of the reasons we went to Hawaii was because my husband wanted to be inside the United States because of Medicare. So are you talking? So this is like, this is not the same thing as travel insurance, is it?
Correct. Not the same thing as travel insurance. So most travel insurances are designed to repatriate you. They're very low cost because they're never designed to pay for medical expenses really while you're traveling. And a lot of those make it very hard to claim for medical expenses while you're traveling. They're really designed in a serious emergency to get you back to your home country where you
Yeah.
already qualify for some kind of medical insurance. Now, you brought up a really good point. A lot of people don't realize that Medicare does not cover you at all while you're overseas. And
Yeah.
this is actually a big financial planning decision for a lot of expats who want to retire overseas because it seems worthless to be paying for Medicare. And a lot of people don't realize Medicare is not free. And
Yeah.
this year, it's almost $203 per
Right. I know.
person per month for the lowest tier of it. And it provides no benefit to you while you're overseas. But the catch 22 with that, of course, is if you don't sign up for Medicare Part
Yeah.
B, every year that you wait, they tack on a 10% penalty that sticks around for the rest of your life
Yeah.
if you do
Yeah.
sign up
So
later.
this could be a big sticking point, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I find in the real world is most expats do sign up for Medicare at 65, even
And
if
it's
they
just
don't
an
use it.
expense.
It's just an expense because they do plan on going home someday. Most expats do repatriate and go home. You get to a point in your retirement, right? You have the go years, the slow go years, and the no go years. That
Yeah.
you just don't have the energy anymore to enjoy being an expat the way you once did. And oftentimes that's a triggering event to maybe move back home, be closer to your kids, family, medical system you're familiar with, things like that.
So, okay, let's talk about like the address. I had a whole lot of fun with change of address things just being in Hawaii. How should retirees think about your mailing address, your legal address. I would think like your residency address that you have for taxes. What kind of local requirements do you think? How do you think about that with the whole thing with mail and without making their financial life more complicated?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's important to plan for that before you go. Now, some people will use friends or family to change their address there and help them sort the mail and take a picture of whatever's important. Other people will go out and use one of the virtual mailbox services available these days where the mail comes in and they scan it and send you an email every day, and you can direct them what to do with the mail. So there's lots of solutions here. But I think the bigger issue that's important to talk about today here is what your address is for two things: for your investment and bank accounts, because what country you're in matters there. Some custodians where you might keep your money are much more friendly to international addresses than others are, and where your state residency may be. Some states will still expect you to pay state tax even if you're living overseas, if you keep an address or any kind of life, a home, a rental, a business, the right to vote in that state. California, Hawaii, New York, very common states going after retired expats overseas, saying, hey, you still got to pay taxes in the state. So oftentimes what makes sense for people is to change their address and domicile in the United States before they leave to a state that doesn't have state taxes, like Florida, Washington, Tennessee, Alaska. There's 7 states that don't have state taxes. And that often will for sure eliminate the problem of state taxes while you're overseas.
Right. Well, before we leave healthcare, I have one more question about healthcare. Does the whole idea of healthcare, where does that fit in the decision with if they're establishing residency abroad? Is there going to be some complexity there?
It depends what country they go to and how important healthcare is to them. A lot of people that are looking to retire overseas are very healthy, and they still have the energy to want to retire overseas. So healthcare might not be a big concern to them. Other people are different levels on the education scale of how healthcare works outside of America, how healthcare might work in the country they're going to, how they might access it, what the real cost of it may be. As I said in our last show, in January and February, I was down in Bali, Indonesia, and there, if you got sick, a doctor would come to your house, give you an IV, stay with you for an hour, give you the antibiotics, and it would be about $35 US. I mean, it's shocking to Americans how inexpensive healthcare can be in other countries. And so oftentimes people that have saved diligently, say in their health savings accounts, have quite a bit of money that they don't have to rely so heavily on insurance, because insurance doesn't, if you do have insurance, it doesn't pay that much. A lot of retirees can cover the healthcare expenses for most things in a lot of these countries just out of pocket, and still be less than what they would be paying for Medicare or private healthcare policy as it is. It's still good to have that health insurance for a catastrophic type event. But, the other thing that I think a lot of people forget that I like to remind people at is in America, it's pretty easy to get back on health insurance. Now with the ACA, commonly referred to as the Obamacare, there's a lot of triggering events that allow you to get onto the ACA health insurance with no pre-existing conditions without being in the open enrollment period. One of those triggers is moving back from overseas. So if you've been overseas for at least 3 months, then when you move back to the States, that's a triggering event. So if you ever did have a major health problem, say, God forbid, you got cancer or something like that and needed expensive treatment, the most you'd have to wait is 30 days. Because as soon as you come back to the States, the first of the following month with that triggering event, you could get on a gold plan, through one of the Obamacare plans and have full coverage in the States, or back onto Medicare if you're 65 or older and available for and eligible for that.
Wow. Well, okay. I want to turn now to couple dynamics. And I can see where some, like one of the spouse, one spouse might be really, really super excited about doing this, and the other one, not so much. Maybe they have family they want to stay close to. So What are the planning issues that show up when one spouse is more ready for doing this than the other one is?
That's a really great question, and I see it a lot. I see it a lot. One of the biggest issues is the cost, right? So there are a lot of places people like to retire that are much lower cost in the United States, which are with a much more laid back style of life, and that's what draws Americans oftentimes to go overseas. But if you're going to Portugal or Spain or somewhere in Southeast Asia because things are much less expensive, but somebody's dragging their foot or you're not quite sure, and so you're still keeping that house in the States and the utilities on that house and still paying taxes because you have that house and you're flying back
Yeah.
and forth because you're not sure, then you're not actually getting any advantage of the lower cost of living in that place that you might want to retire to or spend more time full time. So oftentimes what I see in that situation is they make a compromise and they come back and forth, or they go over for a year or two, but the one spouse, because they're dragging their foot, so to speak, doesn't want to let go of the life in America. And that life in America is costing them a lot of money just sitting there, with all the stuff that they have there. And that negates a lot of the benefits of being overseas, the stress of managing if you're renting your house or it's just sitting
Yeah.
empty, right? And the money that you're still spending in the United States and the flying back and forth and all those other things that come along with trying to keep one foot in America and one foot in the new country.
Wow. Well, so can you think of any examples of what are the most common complications? Is it that just, not being one of them, not being willing to let go?
Absolutely. And the other one that I see quite often is one or sometimes both people will want to rush into a retirement overseas. So
Mm,
I've often seen, unfortunately, one person will convince the other spouse, or they'll try to lock in the overseas idea by rushing a purchase of a property or something that's going
right.
to try to force them to become expats and retire overseas. Kind of like, oh, I'm going to buy a timeshare because it's going to force me to take more vacations. And we all know how great of an investment
Yeah.
that is, right?
Been there, done
Not
that.
to not to knock on timeshares, but you get I think you get my analogy. And
Yeah.
oftentimes that leads to other problems and friction. I think the last time we talked, I talked about I know a couple that went to Portugal. They kind of did this, and they bought a house too quick, and the one spouse had COPD, and they didn't realize that for 3 months of the year, all the farms around their beautiful estate burned all the extra crops and the ditches, and it's a terribly smoky countryside for
You
three
would
months of
never
the
know
year
that.
unless you live there for at least a
Yeah.
year. But it's easy to get excited and think this is the perfect place, and then have one spouse rush something like a purchase of a property to try to force that other spouse into taking that leap, which often leads to complications.
So what conversations should the couples have? Like taxes, healthcare. What about inheritance? I mean, I don't know, that could be something. And like and we call it, your personal, residence. Like my resident state is Washington State because that's the way our whole taxes is set up. But what conversations are the most important ones that couples should be having early when they're talking about this?
Yeah, they need to be realistic with themselves and how much they've actually traveled and experienced life outside of America, and make sure that they tiptoe into it. Patience is the key factor to success.
Yeah.
Too many people get too excited. They don't have the experience. They've only traveled, suitcase traveled to different places, haven't really lived in a place, and then fall in love with a place. I used to live in Hawaii. You just came back from Hawaii.
Yeah.
Every single person that visited me in Hawaii or is walking along Waikiki says the same exact, oh, I could live here. I should move here. I want to love it. But living in a place day to day is very different than
It's
visiting
very
a place
different.
and falling in love with it. So patience is if I could give people one key piece of advice, is patience. Second, talk to people that are ahead of you that have already done it. There's really no
Yeah.
place that anybody wants to go these days that doesn't have already big expat communities where people are willing to talk to you about their journey and how it worked for them and what they surprised them and what they found great, what exceeded their expectations, what didn't, and have those conversations. And then finally, to round it out, to talk with a professional that is an expat specific advisor that can help them walk through all of the finances, the taxes, the residency visas, and all that kind of stuff, and have an adult conversation about the realities of putting all of that together in place. A lot of people don't realize that depending on where they go in Europe, if Europe is their destination, their taxes might be double what they are in the States, right?
Ooh.
So that might mean half the income that they were used to, or a quarter, 25% less. And then they have to figure out whether that's going to still be enough for them to live on in that country. They need to go in with their eyes wide open to those types of situations.
Well, might it be a good idea to have a plan A and a plan B? If one of the, if one person is not so sure about this whole thing?
Well, plan A is always go to the country, and plan B is always that we can just come home, right? That's what I see now 100% of the time. Generally, the people that don't have a plan B are more likely to succeed. The people that really know that this is what they want to do, they
They're like
feel it in
committed.
their bones, they're fully committed. It's in the sailing world, we have a saying, it's really hard to get off the dock. And that is so true when it comes to becoming an expat as well, to actually pull the trigger and put it all together and get off the dock and get out there and do it. That's often the most challenging part. But the people who do it and commit and get off the dock without that plan B are the most successful people, for sure.
Right. Well, what would you say helps people to make these decisions together?
Honest conversations about it. That's the number one thing. Asking each other those good questions.
Yeah.
So that they fully understand, what each person is expecting, what they're expecting to get out of it. So they each understand how the other person envisions a life overseas. It's so many of the little details that people don't realize. They want to retire in Spain, but they're not a night owl. It's kind of hard to retire in Spain, where restaurants don't open till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. If normally you're in bed by 9 o'clock at night, right? So if the culture is just radically different, that might be exciting for one person and a complete turnoff for the other person. So all of those kind of conversations need to be had ahead of time.
Right. So let's say someone is about 12 months out from making a move abroad. What are the first 3 to 5 things that you would want them to be doing?
Doing a side-by-side comparison of the taxes in both countries. Researching the residency visas and starting to line up all the things that they'll need for their qualifications. One that trips up a lot of people I see is a lot of countries will require the background check from America attached to the application, just to prove that you don't have a criminal record in America before coming. It makes total sense. But currently, with the way the government's operating, it can take 4 or 5 months after you send in a fingerprint card to get the actual report back from the FBI for your criminal background check. And so if you're ready to go to Portugal next month and you got to wait 5 months for that background check, you better have a changeable plane ticket, because they're not going to allow you to come in on that visa if all the pieces haven't been put together. So 12 months out, you need to start thinking about all those things, running through the requirements of the visa, running through the requirements of what you're going to be responsible for in taxes, starting to move, if you're in a state that's going to tax you, to a state that hopefully won't tax you while you're overseas. Those are some of the important things to start to consider.
Wow. Well, I mean, we're both financial advisors. We've done plans for people. If you were going to put this in writing, what would a good cross-border retirement plan look like? What would that include?
So it would, for sure, it would include a tax analysis between the two countries. And the plan would look different for each couple. I mean, any financial plan looks different for each couple, but it also looks different for each country. So, I mean, with the residency requirements and the different tax, and whether there's a tax treaty in place or not, whether there's a totalitization agreement in place or not, which governs how Social Security is taxed between the two countries, and then whether there's an estate planning treaty in place as well. You'd mentioned estate planning. That's another big one that will trip up expats going overseas. Not too often, because most Americans retiring overseas will come back before they pass away. That comes more into place when I see somebody who's married to somebody from another country, and you have cross-border planning in that aspect as well. But all of those things need to be considered into that plan that you're going to create for them to go overseas. And the first step in that plan is to make sure that they cross all those hurdles, that they're going to qualify for all the different things, that they're going to pass that background check that we just talked about, and that they have enough money in the bank to qualify, and that their pensions or income or Social Security is enough recurring income to qualify for the country that they want to go to, that they'll qualify for the health insurance that they'll need for that first year in many countries. So all those hurdles need to be looked at.
So here's, I was just thinking, all right, I want to turn a little bit to like currency risk, spending. So like if you have an IRA distribution that is put into your bank account, like you have a monthly distribution from your IRA that goes into your bank account, which is in American dollars, do you then have a bank in the country where you're at and where you can receive that in the, how there's some complexity there that I'm sure that you have some ideas about, but how are they going to deal with that? If we're now talking a little bit about how do you get your money? If your IRA distribution is going into an American bank, then do you have another bank that you draw it out and put it into the currency of the country that you're in?
That's a great question.
That's just a really practical. It's just like, this is like the practical everyday thing that might happen.
Absolutely. That's a really great question. And the mechanics of that are actually pretty easy these days. So a lot of the custodians like Schwab will convert and send money overseas to the bank account. A lot of people use WISE, WISE. Is a very common platform, and you can open up a U.S. account with WISE and say a European account or a Japanese account or Australian account, and so you can just ACH or Zelle or Venmo your money into your WISE account, convert it to whatever currency that you need, and then ACH it or the equivalent of ACH in that country into your local bank account. So moving money has become really quite easy and inexpensive. Most companies, most brokerages, WISE, they generally don't charge anything to move money internationally anymore these days. They do usually make their money on the small spread in exchange rates. You might not get the absolute best exchange rate using something like WISE, but because they move so much money these days, it is a very competitive rate. And so the mechanics of moving money is actually quite simple and straightforward these days. Now, currency risk is the bigger thing there. And
currency risk. I'm just like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So currency risk really, and this is a big misconception that people have, currency risk is only a thing for cash and cash equivalents. So if you're getting your Social Security into your bank every month and you're sending it in euros to Portugal or Spain, you are going to have currency risk, and there's nothing that you can do about that. Every single month when you convert, you're going to get a different amount of euros because the currency fluctuates. Now, the good news is where most people retire, the currencies like euro and dollar are very strong. They're very stable, and they do fluctuate. But generally, if you look over the last 20 years, even with all the media talk about how the dollar is falling apart, this and that, the dollar against the euro, if you look at a 20-year chart, has done nothing but climb and climb and climb and climb and get better and better. So currency risk tends to not be a big issue as most people think it is. And the thing that trips up a lot of expats is that on your long-term investments, in your IRA, your Roth IRA, where you've got, VOO, the Vanguard S&P 500 index fund and things like that, there is no currency risk. And a lot of people, they go, how does that work? And it's a kind of a difficult thing to explain, but the way I explain it to expats is you have to remember that a company, let's just take Microsoft, for example. Microsoft is not more valuable in euros than it is in dollars. I mean, Microsoft is a big company and it is what it is. Currency is a measuring stick in most cases to measure things. And yeah, it fluctuates, but just because it fluctuates doesn't make Microsoft more valuable in one currency than another. I often put it like this, like if let's say you have a little tree, you can measure that tree in inches and centimeters. The tree isn't taller in inches than it is in centimeters. The tree is exactly how big the tree is. And even if the relationship between inches and centimeters changes, the tree is still exactly as tall as the tree is. It's not bigger because you measure it with a different system. And that's the same goes for when you own, say, equities or stock ETFs and things like that. It's exactly the same whether you purchase in US dollars and sell in euros or Japanese yen. There is no currency risk when you're holding those types of investments. So that's a relief for a lot of expats to realize that, hey, I don't get any benefit out of buying Microsoft stock in euros in Europe versus keeping what I already own in US dollars in America.
Whoa. Well, what does, if someone was saying, okay, I just want a minimal viable plan, I just want a basic that would, what would it look like for someone who wants to test drive doing this? So how is a plan going to look like that is just test driving it to make sure that they're doing everything right? What would that minimal viable plan look like?
Great question. So generally for the minimal viable plan, I would recommend a short-term trial. Don't apply for some big residency visa. Most of the countries that people want to retire to are very lenient with Americans and tourist visas. And oftentimes you can apply for just a tourist level visa that'll allow you to stay 6 months or in a lot of countries a full year without becoming any kind of resident. So that would be the minimum viable plan. Get one of those visas, go to a place, rent an apartment,
make sure you're not going to have allergy issues.
Correct. Try out living there. Talk to people while you're there. Eat the food. Immerse yourself in their culture. Figure out their healthcare system. You can do all of that pretty quick. Just living in a place for, say, 3 months, you'd be amazed how that feels like actually living in a country and getting absorbed into their culture. You'll figure a lot of stuff out. The key then is to not get too excited when it all works out and it's really exciting, and then make too quick of decisions moving forward to try to get there quickly. Then just take it slow. But that's the minimal viable plan, is to just go live somewhere for 3 months. Don't become a tax resident. Just figure out whether that place works for you or not.
Do you think that there's a difference in the people that really are successful at this and those that get overwhelmed?
Yes, and there are certainly people that get overwhelmed quite quickly, and that's why a minimum viable plan is a good plan for a lot of people to go try it and see that they get overwhelmed and they miss the conveniences of America. They miss the American food, their friends and family a lot more than they expected they would. So that's why you might want to look at just trialing it out at first, because you might get overwhelmed. If you haven't spent a lot of time overseas as an expat or your working life as an expat, it can be quite a shock to move overseas. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, like a lot of Americans these days seem to think it is overseas. There's the real world and real world problems in every place that you go.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we were, having just come from Hawaii, being there for a year. Oh my goodness, the storms that were in January, February, March. Holy cow, we saw some real damage and we saw some real problems, but that I've never seen before when I've only been there for a week on a vacation on a beach. But you go and live someplace.
Fires in Maui,
Yeah, the fires and the floods on Oahu were just terrible. So yeah, so it's great to really think about this. We are running out of time, so I want to just kind of have let's say, okay, someone's thinking about doing this. So number one, let's kind of go over what we've talked about. Number one is going to be taxes, and thinking about they want to do like an evaluation of what taxes would look like in both countries, right?
Correct. And that'll shock a lot of people right there into
Yeah,
not wanting to move overseas.
right. They may not get past the taxes. So then, okay, so moving on from that would then be studying out visas and residency rules, right?
Correct. The minimum qualifications to apply. Yep.
Okay. And then we talked about mailing address, legal address, local requirements.
Yep.
Anything more to say about
using a custodian that's going to allow you to be overseas, right? So Charles Schwab is probably one of the more friendly expat brokers that you can have an address in Portugal, no problem. Interactive Brokers is another good one that allows a lot of overseas. If you're working with an advisor that uses Pershing, which is an advisor-only custodian, they're also very friendly for overseas. I do get a lot of calls from people that went overseas and they have Fidelity. Fidelity is not friendly for people overseas. And after 5 IP logins from an overseas address, the Fidelity accounts will be frozen. And they'll get a letter saying, hey, you got to prove to us that you're physically in America for us to unfreeze your accounts. It's one of the most common.
You would never know that. You would never know that. Healthcare. Okay, I'm thinking next about, we discussed healthcare. And basically, that would be a whole nother study, right? About what they should do.
Absolutely. But in general, healthcare is not as big an issue as most people think it's going to be. Most places people want to retire, even to the places like remote Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, they're going to have world-class, first-class, English-speaking, modern healthcare facilities for a fraction of the cost. Medical tourism is becoming more and more popular. People are going down to Mexico to have their teeth whitened because it's so much less expensive. People are going to Thailand, to Bangkok, for lots of treatments these days because it's world-class medical for a tenth of the cost of what it is here in the States.
Right. Yeah, we won't get into the politics of that. So, okay. Now, couple dynamics, shared decisions. Basically, I think you're saying sit down and have an honest conversation.
Yeah, and go there with your partner and make sure that you
maybe
both
try it out
in the same light. Yeah, you both see it in the same light, and you both like the same things, and you're both feeling it that it'll work for you. And don't get discouraged if it doesn't. Oftentimes what I find is there's just a different place that will work for both of you than the first place they try. So don't get discouraged if the first place you try out doesn't work. There's often you can figure out what went wrong there and talk to somebody that's traveled a lot and figure out where there might be another place that might fit both of you better.
Interesting. Well, okay. And then kind of last is wrap all this up into some kind of plan, right?
Wrap it all up into a plan with intention, right? So make sure you've asked all the good questions. You've got a plan in place. You've talked to people that have already done it. You're working with a fiduciary advisor who specializes in this. So you don't want to be broadsided, right? There's nothing worse than ruining this whole adventure. You're out there, living your best life. And then all of a sudden you realize that there's a tax bill that wipes out the rest of your travel for the year or something dramatic like that you didn't see coming, which could have simply been avoided by asking those good questions ahead of time and just working with somebody who could guide you, who's done it before.
Well, Jimmy, we are out of time. We're going to have to wrap it up. Is there any final things that you'd like to say about this?
No, I encourage people. I feel like when we talk about this, oftentimes it feels like it's discouraging to go out there, that it's so complex, but it really isn't. There's a whole world out there worth visiting, worth exploring.
Yes.
And don't let any of this stuff or the complexity, it's not that complex. And just with asking those good questions and doing some research online, I mean, Chat GPT, Claude these days can really give you a lot of great information quickly about how things work in certain countries and what to think about, and can help, even those tools can help guide you in the beginning steps to understand what to do so that you can go out there and live your best life and enjoy a retirement overseas.
Yeah. I think the best advice of all is just go try it out. And I would seek out other people that are expats that are doing it already. And I think they're going to get a world of information by talking to people that are actually there.
Absolutely. Internations is the big expat community. So if you go to internations.com, they have a group for every single country, and most countries then have a subgroup for every single city. And it's free to join. And then you can get into the member forums. They host a lot of events around the world in those different countries. It's a good way to meet other expats if you are traveling in those countries. But that's a great place to meet that couple that's just like you, that's already moved to Portugal or Spain or Japan or wherever it is that you're trying to go.
Well, Jimmy, this has really been insightful, I think, too. It really shows that retiring abroad is doable. You don't have to make a big commitment. You can just kind of ease into it. Like you said, baby step, right? And it's basically a planning decision. It just, as I look at everything we've talked about, it's just a planning decision. Jimmy's information is on my website. What's your, tell me your website again.
Yeah. For Americans going overseas, it's baobabwealthabroad.com. Baobab, like the tree of life from the Lion King. baobabwealthabroad.com. And there's free guides, the link to my YouTube channel where there's lots of videos about everything that we've talked about and that you need to know before going overseas. So lots of free information and resources there for you.
Well, thank you for letting us talk through the things that are important to make sure that this is a rousing success.
My pleasure.
And, really, the world is a wonderful place. There is a lot to see. There's a lot that you can gain from going out and getting out there and exploring and adventuring. So, if today's episode, has helped anyone, please share it with those that are thinking about doing this. Like I said, I have a place on my website that Jimmy's information is there. And or else just seek him out, look for his YouTube videos. So with that, we need to say goodbye. And so thank you so much for joining us today on the Ask Good Questions podcast. See you later, Jimmy.
My pleasure. Good to see you again.
Okay.
Today's episode is over, but we did ask good questions again, didn't we? Don't miss out as we broadcast live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. Join Benita Bell-Andersen next week for more conversations with experts on finances, retirement, behavioral finance issues, health and wellness, and more. Until then, remember to ask good questions.